Okay, we're going to look at 4 service set types. Now, these are some terms that you just might read right through in the book and not understand their importance or understand what in the world they're talking about. So I'm going to try to clarify these, or as I said before, disambiguate these so that you can understand them a little bit better. First of all, we have the basic service set. By the way, there are 4 of these, if I didn't say that already. A basic service set is one that is built like this. It's got a single central device, like this wireless router here, and then several devices that connect to it. Very basic, just what you expect from a wireless LAN. So this is a basic service set because it's the most basic kind of design. Over here we have an extended service set, and I really didn't do it justice because I only put one wireless access point. But in reality, here in this business environment, we probably have several wireless access points. So you're in a school and you might have one of these in each classroom or nearby, and as you go down the hall close to the classrooms, you might have 10 of these things in a building, or 20 or 30 in a building, and so you would have multiple devices that these things are accessing. That would be an extended service set because you have multiple points with which these things are connected. The next one is the mesh basic service set, and I see I missed the word basic in there somehow. That should say basic. The mesh basic service set is a central device like this, but you've got these mesh extenders, and you might have this at home. For example, if you've bought one of those mesh units, you plug the main one into your wireless router through Ethernet, and then these guys over here you just have wireless. By the way, there are some versions of this that you plug it in to set it up, and then you can unplug it and move this to some other point. It depends on which one you buy. Others you don't do that, but you have several of these points. But these points are all coming back to this router here. So really this is a basic service set, but you have these sort of extenders here in this mesh unit. The next is the IBSS, and notice in the IBSS, or independent basic service set, I've got no central device at all. I just have these guys all talking to each other, and so that's an independent basic service set. By the way, notice that all 3 of these are basic service sets. There's only one that's the extended service set, and that's this setup here. All right, let's move on then. We still have some time in this one too. The Wi-Fi Alliance. Let's talk about the Wi-Fi Alliance. I know you're all looking down here at the picture, trying to figure out what that's about, but I'll talk about that in a moment. The Wi-Fi Alliance is an organization that was set up to promote Wi-Fi and to set the standards for interoperability. So in other words, the Wi-Fi Alliance is the one that certifies devices, that says, okay, this is a 802.11n device, and it meets all the standards for 802.11n, or all the standards for 802.11ax, and so on. And that's so that devices can interoperate. In other words, the wireless radio card in your computer and the wireless router all work the same way, so that they're compatible with each other. So that's what the Wi-Fi Alliance does. And I think I mentioned last week, Wi-Fi doesn't have any meaning. It's not an acronym for anything. It was just made up by the Wi-Fi Alliance because it sounded cool, and so that's how they came up with it. All right, now we're going to talk about spread spectrum technologies. Spread spectrum is what it means is, remember we said up here that these are not single bands. In other words, it's not just 5.80, it's 5.7 something to 5.8 something. There's a range that these are in. Well, that is a whole spectrum of frequencies. And so what we can do is we can take signals and we can spread them out across that spectrum. And we have different ways of doing that. And we're going to talk about those different ways of spreading these things out. All right, so let's take on the first one, which is FHSS, Frequency Hopping Spread Spectrum, developed by Hedy Lamarr. This is an actress, kind of a sex symbol actress during World War II era, and on the side she was an engineer. Nobody knew that at the time. She really liked to invent stuff, and this is her drawing, her idea of FHSS. And you might notice down here, right behind her shoulder here, is something that looks kind of like a player piano roll. Yeah, that's where the idea came from. Here's what her idea was. And by the way, here's another picture of her inventing, and you can see she has medical textbooks on the side. She was quite a technician. But here was the idea of it. The idea is, well, let's transmit maybe a packet here at this frequency, at the 2.4 something, and then up here at the 2.45 something, and then up here maybe close to 2.48, and then another one down here. And so in other words, we're jumping around in here and transmitting at various frequencies. After a point, we repeat that frequency again, then we repeat it again, and so on. Now, I'm not going to get into the hop time and dwell time and all of those things and what they mean, but the idea is that it's hopping around, frequency hopping. And so that we're transmitting at various points in this frequency range. Now, what does this do for us? Well, it does a couple of things for us. One, it makes it very difficult to jam the signal because it turns out it's not easy to jam a range of signals like this. It's very easy to jam only one, but the reason she designed this was so that when we have radio communication with missiles, we didn't want our enemies to be able to jam the frequency and mess up the trajectory of our missiles. And so it was a security idea. And she got the idea from piano rolls. So this is where acting and technology came together. It was quite an interesting story. It also does something else, by the way. It allows for noise in one area. So if, say, the low bands here are getting a lot of noise, then these high bands can take up the slack. By the way, what happens then if one of these things doesn't make it? Well, it will get retransmitted again at one of these other higher points later on. So these are retransmitted whenever they're not received correctly. This allows for noisy environment, and it helps to bypass interference. So that's kind of cool as well.